Welcome to this week's moonLight of Emuna, Parshas Emor, leading up to Lag BaOmer. This week's learning should be a schus for Fur Shalema, for Nosson Feitel ben Yehudis, Yehuda Menachem ben Rechon per Malkalea, Shmuel Shezan ben Chavachava, Menachem Mordechai ben Ophira, and Lila Nishmas, Charnamash bas Menachem Mendel, Ratza bas Menachem Mendel, and Henya bas Yechiel Mechel. So this week's parsha, we have the description of the period of time that we're in right now, the period of the Omer, right? Beginning in Perek Chav Gimel, the Torah, it tells us about Pesach, and then it tells us about the Omer, beginning in Pasuk Tes. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe lemar, Hashem spoke to Moshe, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amart aleim, speak to the Jewish people and tell them, Ki savoyu el haaretz asher ani noisen lechem, when you come to Eretz Yisrael, the land that I'll give them, Uktzartem es Ketzira, and you will reap the harvest. You'll bring the omer from the first harvest to the kohen. He'll wave it, which we know those who have learned Daf Yomi recently had. You take the omer, and on the second day of Pesach we wave the omer. There's a carbon that goes along with it, right? And now in Pasuk Yudal it says you should not eat any bread or roasted kernels or plum kernels until that day, until you bring the carbon of your God. This will be an eternal decree for your generations. This is the halach of Chadash, that until we bring the carbon ha'omer on the second day of Pesach, we don't eat the new crops. We don't eat the new crops. We don't eat what's called Chadash. And then the psukim continue that you'll count the days from that day until Shavuos. You count 7 weeks, you count 50 days until we get to Shavuos, and then on Shavuos the Torah goes on to describe that we bring the shtei halechem, we bring another type of carbon, and that's on Shavuos. So this is part of the process that we're in the middle of, right? We're sitting here on the 20. I'm recording this on the 28th day of the Omer, just about a little bit more than halfway through this period of time. And now, what's interesting is that the beginning of this period is marked by the carbon ha'omer, which we know is one of only 2 karbanos that were brought with barley. It was the carbon ha'omer was a cake type of offering, a mincha, and it was brought of barley. The mincha on Shavuos, the shtei halechem, that was brought from wheat. So many thoughts about this have been proposed, that the period of the Omer, barley is traditionally considered. The Gemara in Saita says it, right? The Saita is the only other time we have a barley carbon, because we say that the woman acted like it gave into her animal impulses, and therefore we use animal food. So many of the commentators have discussed that on Pesach we start this process of getting ready for Kabbalas HaTorah. We're still working on our animalistic instincts, and therefore we bring animal food as the carbon, and when we arrive at Shavuos, we go back to wheat. Wheat is human food. We've hopefully elevated ourselves between Pesach and Shavuos from our animal instincts to our human, to be full humans in control of our desires. But I saw a beautiful twist on this from the Lubavitcher Rabbi. He says that we know, so as we just explained, that the Omer is barley, right, and it was brought on the second day of Pesach. But we mentioned the halacha when I was reading the psukim that until that pasuk Yudalid, you can't eat the new grain until you bring the carbon omer. So until I bring this animal food carbon, I can't eat the new grain. Why is that? So the Lubavitcher Rebbe explained that the idea of bringing barley flour as the carbon omer, that's the early stages of a person's development, a person's ruchnius, a person's spirituality, right? When his animal instincts are still not tamed. So he has to sacrifice that inner animal within himself, meaning that when a person starts working on himself, the first thing he has to focus on is working on, we're very naturally, those who heard the shir that we gave Monday night, the Chassidus shir Monday night, a person has to work on his animal instincts, those things, the selfishness. We're born with certain selfish instincts, right? A baby worries about when he's going to eat, when he's going to sleep, when his diaper is going to be changed, right? That a baby only has selfish instincts, and a human being has very natural selfish instincts. Only as we mature and we work on ourselves do we get out of our own heads, so to speak, and we start to think about others. And we talked about on Monday night that this is the whole idea of the Omer. This is why Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim died, and they stopped dying on Lag BaOmer. You can listen to that shir. What the first 32 days of the Omer, the failing was in selfishness and not giving enough kavod on their levels, but not giving enough kavod to each other, not thinking about the other person enough. Whereas Lag BaOmer starts the beginning of the transition to thinking about others. So when we start working on ourselves, when a person decides that he wants to improve, he has to start by holding back his selfish, his animalistic tendencies. Therefore, explains Lubavitch Rebbe that before a person is going to enjoy new food, right, the new grain, he has to bring the carbon Eimer, meaning he has to sacrifice his animal tendencies. Right? The barley of the carbon Eimer represents our animal instincts, our selfishness, our negative impulses, our illicit desires. Before I could take part of the new crop, I have to get those things under control, my selfishness, my animal tendencies, my giving into my own selfish desires. And by doing that at the beginning of the harvest season, so we can make sure that even my most mundane impulses are going to be done l'shem shamayim. I'm going to redirect them l'shem shamayim. So it's true that I live in this world and I have to eat and I have to sleep and there's a lot of physical things I have to do, but they're all going to be directed l'shem shamayim. So the first thing I do is I take a carbon that represents those animal tendencies. I bring that as a carbon which represents sacrificing l'shem shamayim, and then I can trust myself to start eating the new produce, the new things that I've collected, the things that I've quote unquote earned, that I could feel, and I won't have to worry about, or I have to worry about it, but at least I've represented that I will no longer think that those were me. That's my product, right? A person goes out to harvest and he can start to think, look, I had such a great year this year because I worked so hard, because I tried so hard. But the carbon Eimer reminds us that you have to tame those animal instincts and remember that everything is coming from Hashem. And there's something else in this week's parsha that the Rebbe points out, which is such a tremendous thing. We know there's a concept. We know that there's a concept that we say brachas before food. And it's not just a concept. We live this, right? We say brachas before we eat anything, before we drink anything. We say a bracha. What are we doing when we say a bracha? When we say, I'm about to drink a cup of coffee, I make a shaka. What am I saying? I'm acknowledging that Hashem is the creator of the world and he owns everything, right? That even though I might have gone to work and received a paycheck and I use that money to buy the coffee that I like, but the truth is I know that it's all Hashem's. It's really nothing to do with me. That's what I'm doing when I make a bracha. To the point that the Gemara in Brachas teaches us, the Gemara in Brachas Dov Lamed Hey says that somebody who enjoys something from this world without making a bracha, it's as if he got personal benefit from Hegdish, right? As if he stole from Hegdish. So, meaning that it belongs to Hashem, and if you eat something without making a bracha, you sort of stole from Hashem, you stole from Hegdish, right? So, but the question is that the Rebbe asks is I don't understand. So, how does making a bracha? If it's true that I'm not allowed to derive benefit from something because it belongs to Hashem, so how does making a bracha change that? Because I made a bracha, now I'm not stealing. Like if I don't have the right to have this thing, why does making a bracha change that? Hashem still owns everything, and how does that make it okay for me now to eat this food or drink this coffee? So he says something so beautiful. He says the truth is you're right. When you make the bracha, you're not changing the ownership of the item. I have this cup of coffee. I'm only using coffee as an example because I have a cup of coffee sitting on my desk right now as I record this, but you take this cup of coffee, it's still owned by Hashem. Even when I'm drinking it, it's Hashem's. The bracha doesn't change the status of the coffee. You know what it changes? It changes my status. It changes who I am, that now I'm allowed to eat it. And he says, you see this in this week's parsha. If you go back a little bit earlier in the parsha, in Perek Chav Beis Pasuk Yud, it says, "V'chol zor lo yochel kodesh." No regular person, a non-kohen, can't eat anything kodesh. Toshav kohen v'sachir, somebody who lives with a kohen or his laborer, lo yochel kodesh, cannot eat kodesh. Meaning, if I work for a kohen, right, the kohen has truma all over his house, I'm not allowed to eat it. I'm Yisrael, I'm not allowed to eat it. But says the next pasuk, v'kohen ki yikne nefesh kinyan kaspai. But if a kohen acquires somebody, he has an Eved Knani, he has a Knani slave, and he acquires him kinyan kaspai with an acquisition of money, hu yochel bay, he can eat it. The yelid beisei heim yochlu b'lachman. Those born in his home may eat the truma. So it's very interesting. You have a Yisrael who works for the kohen. He's not allowed to eat truma. He could be the kohen's best friend. He could be the kohen's son-in-law. He's not allowed to eat truma. But if you have an eved who that the kohen owns, however that works, we're not getting into halachas of avdus. Now he can eat it. Why? What's the difference? He's also not a kohen. That eved's not a kohen. If that eved was freed tomorrow, he's not a kohen. Why is the eved of the kohen allowed to eat it? And by the way, this is not only limited to truma. It also, the halacha applies to certain things of hegdish also. The kohen gets certain meat of the karbanis. His eved can eat it. So it's a strange thing. So a full-fledged Yisrael can't eat. He could be the Kohen's best friend. He could be the Kohen's son-in-law, right? He could be the Kohen's brother-in-law, but he can't eat. But the Eved can. Why? So without getting too much into the idea of the nature of a slave, but a slave has no persona of his own. He's completely owned by his master. He's like an extension of his master. He lives to do the master's will. He completely is subsumed in the master's personality. He doesn't have an independent existence. He's part of the master. He's an extension of the master. A son-in-law, a brother-in-law, it could be very close, but you're not part of the Kohen. You can't eat the Kohen's food. But the slave lives only to fulfill the master's will. He becomes part of the master's will. If he'll be freed, he's no longer part of that. He can no longer eat truma. But as in his status as a slave, he's part of the master, and therefore, if the master is allowed to eat truma, he's allowed to eat truma. He's an extension of the master. Okay, obviously, there's a lot of technical halachas about this, but that's the basic concept. He's part of the master. Now going back to our question that we asked. We said, how does making a bracha change the status of this coffee? If I drink this coffee without making a bracha, I'm considered a gan if I stole from Hegdish. But if I make a bracha, now I'm perfectly allowed to have that coffee. So the idea is like this. What is a bracha? A bracha, when I say a bracha, what am I saying? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. I'm acknowledging that Hashem is the Lord, the King of the universe. He is my master. I'm saying Baruch atah Hashem, and the way we pronounce Hashem, Aleph Daled Nun Yud, is calling him my master. Elokeinu, he's our God. Melech, he's our King, haolam of the entire universe, right? What I'm doing when I say a bracha is, I'm saying that Hashem is the master of everything, including me. I am Hashem's slave. I am Hashem's servant. I am a part of Hashem. I have no will independent of Hashem. Just like the master, the Kohen's slave, has no will independent of his master, of the Kohen. So we too are saying, we're declaring with the bracha that I am a slave to Hashem, that I only want what Hashem's will is. I have no independent will. When I do that, now I become an extension. Now I'm allowed to partake of my master's things, just like the Kohen's slave. When he's a slave and he's part of what the will of the Kohen, he can eat the foods that the Kohen can eat that nobody else can eat. So too I, when I say that I am Hashem, when I'm acknowledging that I am subservient, I'm subsumed in Hashem's will, so I'm allowed to now eat the food. Just as the Eved of the Kohen can have the food that are exclusive to its owner, so too by making a bracha. When I make a bracha, I can enjoy this world, the goodness of this world that is exclusively owned by Hashem, who is my master. It's a beautiful, beautiful idea in our relationship with Hashem and our relationship with brachas. And this is really the idea of the whole period of time that we're in. We're about to get to that transition point, Lag BaOmer. The Omer, we start off with the barley carbon. We start off recognizing that we have our own desires. We have our own animalistic instincts. We bring a carbon Omer, and then Hashem allows us to start partaking of the world. Through the 49 days leading up to Shavuos, we're working on ourselves, slowly transforming ourselves into people who are not thinking about our own will. What do I want? But we start thinking about what is it that Hashem wants. That's the process that we go through, so that when we come to Shavuos, we'll be standing there saying we only want Hashem's will. We're complete servants, we're complete avodim to Hashem. We only care about Hashem's will. We're part of Him. And we do that with every bracha we make, every tefillah, every time we learn, every time we daven. That's everything is to bring us to that point. And like BaOmer is this transfer point where for the first 32 days of the Omer, Rabbi Akiva's students, they didn't have that lesson of being given over to others, right? Part of Hashem's will is that we're good to others. They didn't have that covet on their level for others. They were self-absorbed. They were worried about their own covet. Lag BaOmer, we start to make that transition. We spoke about it also Monday night. The first 30 days is Leiv. The last 17 days out from Lag BaOmer on is Toiv. The idea is to transform our hearts that are selfish into hearts that are giving and are good and are thinking about Hashem and our relationship with Hashem and our relationship with other people and doing for other people. So this whole period, we have these opportunities to connect and to remember that we're here to serve Hashem. And Hashem wants us to enjoy the good of the world, but to remember who gave us the good of this world, who gives us the ability to enjoy these things. And therefore, when we make a bracha, we're acknowledging that Hashem is our master, right? And we're no longer the animalistic people eating barley like animals, but we're working our way up to the wheat carbon of Shavuos, to the Kabbalah Satira. And like BaOmer is this transition point. So we have to take this opportunity, this week's parsha that talks about these ideas, And coming into Lag BaOmer to transform, to turn that switch in our heads, to say, I'm no longer going to act with the heart that is selfish and self-absorbed, but to act with the heart that's a Leiv Toiv, right? Which is Leiv and Toiv are the two parts of the Sphira that make up the 49 days of Sphira. Leiv Toiv, and to think about Hashem and to acknowledge Hashem as our master, and to realize that we're partaking of our master's goodness, and everything that we have in this world is from our master who loves us. And with that, we prepare ourselves through this transition through Lag BaOmer to be prepared for the great revelation of Matan Torah and to be able to receive the Torah anew on Shavuos. I wish you all a beautiful Shabbos and a happy Lag BaOmer.